We've grown so habituated to celebrating our diversity and our differences that we forgot all of the ways we're really just the same as Americans, bound by a common creed.
In this video, we're going to examine the claim of diversity is our strength. Is diversity really our strength? And my verdict is, well, it depends. What sort of diversity are you talking about? Are you merely talking about superficial diversity? You know, if we just get a bunch of people of different shades of skin and different sexual orientations, that this will automatically result in something good because it's a diverse crowd. If you're talking about that type of diversity, if all those people share the same core values, then it probably can be a strength. If you have a plurality of people sharing the same values, there are some advantages to that. However, if they don't share the same core values, if, let's say, one group of people want a classically liberal society, they want freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and a large segment of that cadre doesn't share those values. Perhaps they want to impose Sharia law on society. Well, that sort of diversity is not going to be our strength. In fact, you're going to have friction and conflict, and it's probably not going to turn out too well. In that case, diversity just becomes a platitude. Diversity is our strength would be demonstrably wrong in that situation. But in the rest of this video, I'm going to sort of flesh out why I think that and where the woke crowd goes astray and misses the plot. So one of the ancient works that I actually got a lot from was the Apology of Socrates. The story of Socrates reminds me a lot of the Christ narrative in the New Testament. Not in a sacrilegious way. Socrates doesn't claim any special divinity, doesn't claim to be sent by God or anything like that. But as far as the plot goes, Socrates is a sort of a truth seeker. He goes around asking pointed questions, trying to boil things down to people's underlying assumptions. And in doing this, he learns a lot, and he likes to spread his truth. This gets him a lot of enemies because he makes fools of these people that are highly regarded by basically questioning them and showing that they're not quite as bright as they think they are. And naturally, like if somebody makes a fool of you in public, you're probably not going to like that person. It's the old speak truth to power thing. So these enemies that he cultivates for himself end up bringing him to trial, and then the Apology of Socrates is him giving a defense of himself. Now, I'm not going to get into all the details of the story, but basically Socrates' life goes as follows. This oracle that he goes to tells him that he's the wisest man in Greece. Socrates is fairly skeptical of that because he doesn't think he's all that smart. So he goes around and tries to find people that are wiser than him to prove the oracle wrong, or at least test the oracle. He wants to see if this is really the case. So he goes to different types of people. If I remember correctly, there's basically 3 different groups that he went to. He would go to the politicians who were thought of as wise, and he would ask them questions, and it soon became evident to him that they weren't as smart as they were thought to be, certainly not as smart as they thought they were in their own eyes. And that I get. And then he goes to another group. He goes to the artisans, people that are really, really skilled in whatever craft that they're specialized in. And their mistake is they think that because they're really, really smart in one thing, that intelligence applies to everything else. And because they're brilliant architects or brilliant engineers, they think, well, I'm really smart in this way. They think because they're smart in one particular specialization, that must be smart in other ways as well. That's sort of a fallacy I can see in people in modern times. Just because you have a degree in a particular field, it does show a certain level of studiousness where obviously you had to study to earn that degree. That doesn't mean that you're wise in areas outside of your expertise. So that always made sense to me. I can see people thinking that way, making that error. But there was a third group that always puzzled me a little bit. He talked about the poets who would write these great poems and plays, and and have all these marvelously crafted words. But his critique of them is they didn't understand what they were saying. They made it sound really good, but they didn't quite understand what they were saying. And that always that didn't click in my head yet. It's like, how could you be a poet and write these great, marvelous, beautiful words and not understand what they mean? Well, I think I finally figured that out. These are people that they can chant these beautiful slogans, such as diversity is our strength. But because they're not very thoughtful, they're not very deep people, they're just slogans, they're just repeating platitudes, and they haven't really worked out what exactly that means. So how can diversity be our strength? Diversity can be our strength if we have a diverse group of people with different skills and different talents, but they're united by common core values. So they're all working towards the same goal. They have the same vision of what society should be like. I'm talking on principles, like take the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, something I talk about a lot. If everybody agrees that we should all have freedom of speech, well then diversity is our strength, because we can have a diverse set of opinions out there. We can have an open marketplace of ideas. We can have good argumentation and debate as to what's the best way of pursuing a certain goal in society. And if it's done in good faith, the better ideas will tend to win out because they'll be more persuasive. And in that regard, diversity is our strength. Diversity of opinion, diversity of thought. As where if you have people that are only concerned with superficial diversity, they don't care about diversity of thought. They want everybody to have the same opinion. They want everybody to conform to the same ideology. They just want a superficial form of diversity. They want, lots of different skin shades represented in their group. They want lots of different, they want a lot of different sexual orientations represented. As long as they're all on the same page ideologically, and there's no, they're not straying from, say, the policy positions of the Democrat Party. Or if, let's say, rather than pursue a meritocracy and just let the strongest individuals in a particular field excel, they want to disrupt that meritocratic system and instead have quotas where it's not about having the best people in a particular field. It's about having a diverse group represented in a particular field. Think about the NBA. The NBA is the cream of the crop of the cream of the crop of basketball players. And it just so happens the majority of the NBA happens to be black, because African Americans seem to be the best at playing basketball. That isn't necessarily true on an individual level, but it's definitely true on a demographic level. Is it nature? Is it nurture? It's probably a combination of both. Is there a higher degree of athleticism innate in African Americans, or is it a cultural thing? More young black kids grow up playing basketball in America, so there's a larger pool of talent, and because of this, they're overrepresented in the highest echelons of that athletic discipline. My guess is it's probably a combination of both. But in any event, if we wanted to destroy this meritocracy and impose a equity inclusion quota on them and say, well, blacks are overrepresented in the NBA, so we need to make it harder for blacks to get into the NBA and make it easier for whites to get into the NBA, because whites make up 60% of the population, so they should be roughly 60% of the NBA. Well, that would be anti-meritocratic. You'd be discriminating against blacks, making it harder for them to get into the NBA, and you'd be discriminating in favor of whites, making it easier for them to get into the NBA. So rather than just let the best players, look at people as individuals and just let the best players rise to the top, regardless of what their skin tone happens to be, in the name of diversity, we're going to handicap some people and favor other people so that everything fits nice into our quota. Now let's change fields a little bit. Let's talk about higher education. Asians tend to outperform any other group as far as they're overrepresented in attainment in higher education. People of Jewish descent, this is also true of. They tend to be overrepresented in higher education, followed by whites, and then Hispanics and African Americans are actually underrepresented in terms of percentage of the population versus percent in higher education. So several decades ago, to make up for this, we had affirmative action. We essentially handicapped Asian students and to a lesser degree white students, making it harder for them to get into schools, and we made it easier for other minorities to get into school. We lowered what their SAT scores needed to be in order to get into these more prestigious schools. Affirmative action. It's been controversial since forever, and actually the Supreme Court, I believe, ruled against affirmative action. And rightly so, in my opinion, because that's basically the definition of racism. Rather than just let the best students in and have it be meritocratic, they decided to play this game with diversity and quotas. And in my opinion, it's racism flat out. I mean, if you have one standard for this color people and another standard for this color people, that's the definition of racism. You're not treating people as individuals, judging them on their own merits, their own skills. You're treating them as groups, giving special privileges to some and disadvantaging others. And this is where the diversity, the woke crowd goes astray, in my opinion. By playing this game and making these quotas and selectively deciding, okay, well, in this particular field, we need to handicap these people based on their skin color, and we need to favor these people based on their skin color. All they're doing is breeding conflict and resentment between these different groups of people that they've decided to categorize everybody into. Which again, in my mind, the enlightened thing to do is to view people as individuals first, judge them on their own character, their own merit, and then that's it. You don't need to divide people into tribes based on their immutable characteristics and then start pitting them against each other with this identity politics. That isn't progressive, in my opinion. That's actually regressive. That's the opposite direction we want to go. We want to view people as humans, view people as individuals, and not judge them based on their immutable characteristics, and not show favoritism to them based on that, not to discriminate against them based on their immutable characteristics. And if you did that, you would just have the best people in their particular field excelling in those fields. And this would be the greatest good for society. This is where diversity truly would be our strength. If you have a diverse group of people, individually they all have their own strengths. They're allowed to pursue those and obtain at the highest possible levels as far as they can go. And this would offer the highest benefit to society because you would have the best people in their field in those positions. Identity politics is actually regressive in this way. It seeks to promote people on something other than merit. And it's selective in how they apply it too. I mean, you don't hear anybody talking about diversity quotas in the NBA. You could apply it to gender politics as well. You talk about, we need more women in leadership positions in companies, more women CEOs in that. But they never talk about, we need more women represented in offshore oil rigging or mining or some other field that's dominated by men. So it's very selective. It's by its very nature, it's divisive and obnoxious. And if that's the sort of diversity you're talking about, and that's how you're pursuing diversity, well then it's my contention that you don't really know what you're talking about, and you're not a very enlightened person. You're actually regressive, you're not progressive. But anyway, I want to end this video with a brilliant clip of Thomas Sowell where he looks at this by the numbers and just goes through a list of groups and like different fields that they excel in. And he sort of mocks this idea that, in every field there should be equal representation between all these different diversity groups, when clearly different cultures and different innate characteristics in people lead to some people are just better at certain things than others. And if we truly want to celebrate diversity, we should accept that, and we should create a meritocratic environment where those people can thrive and do what they do best. And in that vein, they truly would be our strength. Diversity would be our strength in a meritocracy. So this following clip of Thomas Sowell comes from a channel called Liberty Pen. Liberty Pen I've followed for a long time. They put out a lot of interesting content. So yeah, credit goes to Liberty Pen.
When intellectuals discover that the world does not behave according to their theories, the conclusion they invariably draw is that the world must be changed. It must be awfully hard to change theories. The prevailing unproven dogma of the intellectuals today is that groups would be evenly distributed statistically if it were not for arbitrary barriers, discrimination, and other forms of social melees. Courts of law listen solemnly while statistics are used to show that the ethnic, sex, or other balance of some company's employees could not be the result of random chance. Once that is shown, the company is well on its way to being convicted of discrimination, even if it applied the same hiring and promotion standards to everybody. Applying statistical analysis of random events would make sense if human beings were random events, but groups differ around the world, and they have differed throughout history. In the simple task of collecting sap from rubber trees in colonial Malaya, the average Chinese worker produced twice the output of the average Malay worker. In India's state of Andhra Pradesh, farmers from the coastal region have gotten 3 times the output per acre of farmers from the interior, even when the coastal farmers moved into the interior and farmed the same land just used by interior farmers. In baseball, there were 7 consecutive years in which no white man won the National League's Most Valuable Player award. Given the racial makeup of the United States, the odds against that happening by random chance are more than 600,000 to 1. But the fact that it wasn't pure chance does not mean that there was collusion or discrimination against whites. Far from behaving randomly, groups show the most pronounced patterns, persisting for centuries in very different societies. The military achievements of Germans have not been confined to Germany, but go back thousands of years in other countries as well. More than once, the entire army of the Roman Empire was headed by a general of German ancestry, and the same has been true in Tsarist Russia and in the United States in both world wars. Germans in Tsarist Russia were 1% of the population and 40% of the military officers. People do not immigrate randomly. During the great era of Italian immigration to the Western Hemisphere, most people from southern Italy went to North America, while most people from northern Italy went to South America. Figure that out. People from towns just a few miles apart in Italy settled on opposite coast of Australia. Similar patterns are common in other countries. Most pre-war Japanese immigrants from around Hiroshima went to the United States, those from Nagasaki to China, and those from Okinawa to the Philippines. In the Balkans, more than half the population of one Macedonian village immigrated to Toronto. People who go on to higher education from different social or ethnic backgrounds do not specialize in the same mix of subjects. The Japanese and the Hispanics specialize in a drastically different mix of subjects, whether you compare Japan with Hispanic countries or Japanese Americans with Hispanic Americans. In India, untouchables who attend the universities do not choose the same subjects as other castes, nor do the Central Asians in the Soviet Union choose a random mix of subjects, or the same mix as other ethnic groups, nor do all groups perform at the same level. More than half the students in Sri Lanka who received an A on the university mathematics entrance examination were from the small and oppressed Tamil minority. Similar results can be found from Chinese, Japanese, or Jewish students in the United States and other countries. These many peoples have undoubtedly all had their reasons for their decisions, and there were undoubtedly also reasons why performance levels in the same activities have differed so dramatically, whether or not observers will ever know what all these reasons were. But reason is not randomness. It is time to tell the intellectuals that their theories are wrong, and that we are not going to tear the world apart trying to make reality conform to their preconceptions.
You've been watching the Fletch Report. If you're hearing this, it means you've made it to the end of the video. But before you click onto the next thing and continue down whatever rabbit hole you're on YouTube or Rumble, I've got a small favor to ask. If you found value in my content and you want to help the channel out, the best thing you can do is share it with somebody else that you think will find value in it. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more. Links to the channel on YouTube and Rumble will be provided below. Additionally, I'm making a Facebook page for the channel as well as a X/formerly Twitter. Feel free to follow me on those platforms as well. If you're feeling exceptionally generous, provided in the description below will be a link to Buy Me a Coffee, which is the online equivalent of a tip jar. Thanks for watching, and thanks for supporting the channel.